What is going on, everyone? Happy Sunday. Hope you guys are having a wonderful weekend. And we're going to get right into it. South Carolina suffered a 36-33 loss to LSU yesterday. And tonight on GC Live, Sunday Reset with myself, Jack Veltri from GamecockCentral.com. If you don't know anything about me, I cover Gamecock football, men's basketball, and baseball for GC. And we're going to talk all about this loss yesterday for South Carolina. And before we get rolling with that, want to talk to you guys real quick about our friends over with Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. With Clint, if you're in need of help with your mortgage or buying a home or whatever the case might be, Clint is your guy to call. He's been in the mortgage industry for a very long time now, and he is he's one of the best out there. He's a Gamecock fan, longtime supporter of GamecockCentral.com, and I know he's helped out our very own Wes Mitchell and former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth. So if you're interested in reaching out to Clint, the number to call is 803-422-6797, or you can go to ClintHammond.com, or the NMLS number for him is 71597. So thank you to Clint for being a longtime supporter and sponsor. So happy to be back on. Thank you, Hutch, for tuning in as always. It is great to be back on. Unfortunate that South Carolina did lose yesterday, and it stinks. It's a horrible feeling, right, for the players, the team, everyone, and I'm sure for the fans too. It stinks because that's a game that you felt like you should have won. You had plenty of opportunities to do so, but you didn't. And obviously, one of the main talking points we'll get into tonight. Big says these refs were absolutely horrible. And I know this will not be the last comment that is brought up about the referees. It is what it is. It's not ideal, the officiating, but we'll get into more of my thoughts on it here shortly. I have a guest that will be joining us in just a few minutes here. And William Jones says, yo, Jack, yo, William, what's up, man? Appreciate you hopping on and joining me. But it was, my first initial thoughts from the loss yesterday. And by the way, I did want to bring something up that I did say yesterday. When I was recording my post-game video, which I do every week, I didn't realize it until after the fact that I said South Carolina laid an egg. I just want to go ahead and apologize and own up to it because in the moment, when I'm recording these videos, it's just literally, there's no script. It's just whatever's going on in my head with my thoughts and stuff, I'm just going to come out and say it. And it came out. And honestly, the way I say it, I shouldn't have even said to begin with. South Carolina, honestly, if you watch the video, I thought they honestly played pretty well. And look, it's just a really tough loss for South Carolina, and they shouldn't have lost that game. It really is just tough to see. And Hutch says we lost. It's sad, but this won't be our only loss. But talking more about the loss, wanted to bring on a good friend and someone who covers the other side of things with LSU. Bring Koki Riley from The Advocate out in Baton Rouge. Koki, how we doing, man?
Doing pretty good, Jack. What's up?
Not much, man. A lot going on here in Columbia after this loss, but wanted to bring in someone like yourself that knows a thing or two about LSU and breaking the game down from all perspectives, right? Because it was just it was a crazy game yesterday, man.
Yeah, I can only imagine how crazy it was since you were there. Where do you even start, right? This game was just kind of all over the place, and from an LSU perspective, I think they still have a lot of the same, maybe not all of the same issues, but a lot of the same issues that they had heading into this game. And I gained more respect for South Carolina's defense after a game like this, but at the same time, if it weren't for Kaden Durham, I think they certainly lose this game. If it weren't for some of the things that went their way, like a call here or there, or especially one in particular with the offensive pass the phantom offensive pass interference call that was not there. I think that was in the fourth quarter. And, if it weren't for that, weren't for a couple of those other things, I don't think they win this game. So, a lot for LSU still to work on, but I think we can all break it down here.
Yeah, let's talk about the officiating first, because that is honestly the main point that a lot of people, especially South Carolina fans, are really up in arms about. And I understand to an extent why, because you get flagged 13 times for 123 yards and penalties. LSU obviously had their fair share of penalties too. I think they had 9 for 75 yards. But I think it's clear to everyone that the penalties impacted South Carolina a lot more, because you take 2 pick sixes off the board. And look, it shouldn't have even come down to that point, in my opinion. You had a 17-0 lead and did nothing with it after that. But it is important to realize, like, if Nicky Minwari's pick 6 in the fourth quarter stands, you're up by you're up by 11 points, and you're on your way to a probable victory, I would say. I mean, you're up by 2 scores, but I mean, you look at the numbers here. I mean, in the second half, I mean, South Carolina had 9 penalties, LSU had 4, and 7 of those, I believe, came in the fourth quarter for the Gamecocks. So, just in general, man, I mean, what did you make of the officiating and the way the penalties came out?
Really, besides the offensive pass interference call, that was an offensive pass interference, which ended up being an absolutely massive play because there was a turnover 2 plays later. Outside of that, there weren't really that many calls that I thought were poor or were totally missed. It was weird. I will say it was weird that the refs kept on like saying the wrong player's number for.
Oh, that was so weird. It kept happening over and over again. At one point, I was rewatching the game broadcast, and I noticed it while I was there, man. But like, I think it was an illegal man downfield or pass. No, it was offensive pass interference. And they were saying Robbie Ashford, South Carolina's backup quarterback, was responsible for the penalty. But I'm like, he's not even on the field. This is when Lenore Sellers was healthy and out there. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? It was so weird, man. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, outside of those 2 things, like there was nothing that like for example, that last pick 6 at the end of the game, that was a penalty. Like that was an unnecessary, over the top personal foul, and that's just an undisciplined play on a play that you can't be doing. And for the horse collar, I just saw the comment here from William with the horse collar call. That's a horse collar. I mean, his hand is clearly wrapped around his shoulder pad, and he's yanking him down from it. I mean, it's textbook. So like, I don't really. I mean, the offensive pass interference call, like that was the one thing that I think LSU got a major break on. Everything else, I mean, they seem like penalties to me. I don't really know what else, unless you can think of something else that pops out.
So I'm rewatching the horse collar one, because I think that's honestly the one that I think it was a penalty ultimately. I know people are going to disagree. And I'm like literally like looking up the specific definition of the horse collar tackle. And, I mean, it's either you're tugging on the back of the collar or you're literally like pulling on the shoulder pad. So I kind of understand why it may seem like that's not a horse collar tackle and stuff. And keep in mind, the horse collar tackle rules have changed this year, because in the past, it used to be, from my understanding, in the tackle box, that's when a horse collar tackle is called. But now you can call it anywhere on the field. So I think, look, it's a tough call, but I mean, it was kind of clear as day, man. He was pulling all on the back of the jersey, and it had a clear impact on the throw, because if Garrett Nussmeier doesn't get pulled like that, he's not overthrowing that receiver the way he did. So look, it's tough. I am of the belief, and I think you are too, that it was a horse collar tackle, but I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that.
Honestly, it's kind of confused, because I mean, it to me just looks like some sort of penalty, right? Like when the play was happening real time. So it is a little confusing to me. So you sent me a little. I will say, like, you sent me a little some notes on what we're going to talk about today, and that was the first thing you brought up with the penalties. And I was a little bit surprised that was the first thing you were bring up, because that the penalties outside of the offensive pass interference call, like it never really popped out to me that the refs were a huge problem in this game. That, and I guess and honestly, the calling the numbers, the wrong numbers thing was just like, what is going on?
And but, let me clarify this. Like, the reason I put that number 1 is obviously from a USC perspective.
Yeah.
it's the main thing everyone's talking about.
But it's interesting that that's the main thing everyone's talking about in South Carolina. Like I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to hear that.
Look, a lot of people are going to blame this loss on the fact that South Carolina got screwed over by the refs, this and that. But then again, there's so many times in this game where you just made, I'm not going to call it stupid, but just plays that you shouldn't make. Like Kyle Kennard hitting the quarterback. I mean, to me, at first glance, I'm like, I think I called it senseless yesterday. I'm like looking at it again. I'm like, I can kind of see why people think like it's a little over the top and exaggerated. But again, what is the point in hitting the quarterback on that play?
No.
It is not like Nussmeier is catching Niki Minwari. Like, I don't understand that.
It's an undisciplined play.
Yes, like, that is what I have to say about it too.
Yeah, it's just an undisciplined play, and that was the right call. And I immediately when he caught that ball and he took it to the end zone, I thought game over pretty much. Right, it's 11-point lead. But it's like you just cannot do that. And I mean, I don't think there's much else to say other than that.
No, definitely. Trying to think of like other specific, this was interesting. So Shane Beamer speaks to the media. I think I was telling you this. He does like a teleconference call on Sunday nights. And I was going back to watch this after we were done with the teleconference. Apparently he saw something on the missed field goal at the end of the game from Alex Herrera that there were apparently, quote, 2 taunting calls that just weren't called. I'm like rewatching the tape on the game, and I'll give Beamer some credit. I mean, the ABC replay crew doesn't really give you a good angle of anything specific that would lead you to believe that there's taunting, but maybe there's something from the field that he saw that we're just not seeing. Did you notice anything in particular that would have like stood? I mean, LSU's celebrating a win, so I don't know what exactly he saw.
Well, LSU got called with 2 taunting calls during the Southern Cal game, the other USC game.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if that actually happened. Like maybe it did happen. I didn't notice a thing, honestly. No. And there's a lot more leeway in terms of overreacting when you've essentially clinched the game.
Literally. And I was trying to look this up too. I mean, you can clarify if but I mean, obviously there's flags thrown on the last play of the game or whatever, but I mean, the game was already over and it's like they're just celebrating a win, man. It's like I don't get it. And here's the exact quote from Shane talking about it. He said, "This isn't sour grapes or Shane's complaining, but I've been told that this year in the SEC that celebrations are going to be allowed. I watched the games the first weekend, and I see some guys doing celebrations in the end zone. That's great. Let these guys have fun. But I was told celebrations were going to be allowed a little bit, but there's going to be a very clear emphasis on taunting. So for that crew yesterday to throw 22 flags, and on the last play of the game, I think there's 2 very clear instances of taunting that happened after the kick. And after throwing 22 flags, no one decided to throw a flag on that one. Again, I don't. It's kind of just like I'm just like laughing, thinking like what? Like Shane's awesome to cover. Like, but that is such a like. I'm gonna refrain from using my actual thoughts on this, but it just sounds like a big excuse, man. It's just you lost the game, and penalties are a big part of why this game. You take 2 pick sixes off the board, but again, it's like those things are South Carolina's fault, and no one seems to really be talking about the offsides call South Carolina had late in the fourth quarter, once again on Kyle Kennard. I think it was on the go-ahead touchdown drive that LSU had, and it was like 4th and 3, and you just jump off sides. I mean, like you got to be more disciplined than that for a 5th-year player. But I don't know, man. It was just again penalties were not they were such a big factor in this game from a Carolina perspective. But I know for LSU, it's like it happens.
And I will note, since we're talking about refereeing and penalties, on the blocked punt earlier in the game, I mean, LSU apparently they're going to try to talk to the SEC offices about this. This is what Brian Kelly said after the game. You might have caught this, Jack. But
yeah, what did you make of that?
They think so. So basically, to summarize, LSU thinks the blocked punt was illegal. It was that they shouldn't have been allowed. My guess was when the tight end Mo Maurice, what's his last name?
Yeah, Maurice Brown.
Maurice Brown, he jumped over the two blockers, and I think they think that's illegal because that's my guess. I don't know exactly what they think is illegal, but my guess is they probably think he put himself in danger by doing that. I don't know. Again, I don't know exactly what they thought was illegal about the play, but they thought it was illegal. Yeah. So I think that's why they're not really stressing too much out about that play. And, from their perspective, it's like, you take away that block punt, there's no touchdown there. You're forcing South Carolina to go down the field. Maybe the score's a little different, and maybe the end of the game is a little different. I don't know. So many things happen in this game. There's so much chaos that you can go through every single moment. And sort of pick it with a comb, right? And try to find little things that can change the outcome of the game. But I think at the end of the day, I think the bigger, honestly, I think the biggest thing that happened in this game outside of any call or really you could argue really any turnover was the injury to Sellers.
Dude, that was
the game completely. Massive. Because I think if he's healthy, I think they probably win that game.
Probably. I would say there's a really good chance because at least to me, being there, seeing it, I'm like, okay, South Carolina's running. That first series of the game, man, I've said it before. That was the single best drive I've seen under offensive coordinator Dal Loggins in his 2-year time here at Carolina. Just everything was smooth. You're running good pass plays. Rocket Sanders is running for big games. Your offensive line is really blocking well. As the first half went on, it still was pretty good. Lenore Sellers obviously had the 75-yard run, and then he gets hurt on the sack there. And it looked like he kind of went down awkwardly, which led to the ankle sprain. But second half, man, it felt like they were holding back their punches offensively with Robbie Ashford in there because, they only ran, I think, 5 pass plays the entire second half. And Carolina doesn't throw the ball a ton. Obviously, they rely more on the run game. But in a situation where you need to maybe mix it up a little bit, I think it helped out LSU with the fact that Ashford and Sanders were just running it most of the time.
Yeah, and when the run's going to come, it's much easier to defend the run. Even then, they still gave up that giant touchdown run to the Sanders, but they didn't really South Carolina. I thought they had a very strong start to the game running the ball, and I thought they had a couple massive runs. There's one massive run in the first half and another massive run in the second half, but really after that first quarter, they didn't. LSU did a pretty good job of sort of limiting the 5-yard run, the 4-yard run, the consistent churn that really creates an effective running game. And it kind of forced them. They did a better job of forcing South Carolina into more third and longs, and that was able to sort of activate Braden Swinson, the rest of that defensive line, and sort of take advantage of South Carolina's offensive line. South Carolina came out of this game like a house on fire. They were clearly the more juiced team. They did a really good job of taking advantage of the crowd that they had going for them early in the game. But as the game went along, I think LSU kind of wore them out in some ways. And I think with the running game in particular, that was part of it. But I say that to also say that if you had Sellers who, made a couple decent passes in the first half, if you have a fully healthy Sellers, it definitely makes defending the run a lot harder because not only is he a really good running threat, but he could also take it in and throw the ball a little bit. So I think South Carolina's their weakness in general is their passing attack. They need a better passing attack. They need a more consistent passing attack. They need to be able to threaten teams downfield. They haven't really done that through the first 3 weeks of the season. But when Ashford's in the game, there's a difference between not having the greatest passing attack and having no passing attack at all. So you could really feel that in the second half of this game.
Totally. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that LSU was kind of wearing down South Carolina. Because honestly, at least to me, for most of this game, it felt like South Carolina was the better team. They had the lead, I think, majority of the way. Obviously, I know LSU finally came back in the fourth quarter, not once, but twice to take the lead. But it felt like majority of the way, especially in that first half, things were just rolling. And LSU eventually started catching up offensively. But that third quarter, man, I think that is something we don't talk about enough, is just how much of a backbreaker I think that was from a South Carolina perspective. I mean, you look at the numbers. LSU had 175 total yards in that quarter. Granted, they only scored 6 points, but for Carolina, they only had 1 yard. 1 yard. And they ran 6 offensive plays compared to, I think, like LSU's maybe like 23. So, I mean, just how much of a difference do you feel like that made in terms of, like you said, wearing South Carolina out, but also getting the offense going for sure for LSU?
Do you mean just like how important was it for LSU to get their offense going in general?
Yeah, pretty much.
The first 3 drives for LSU were punts, and then after that, they basically had scoring drives, even if they didn't end up scoring for the rest of the game. I mean, it was, even when they didn't score, it was like a turnover in the red zone, or they were driving and DJ Chester snaps the ball when Garrett Nussmeier isn't ready, or it's 4th and goal at the 1 yard line and they can't punch it in like that. Those are the only 3 times that they didn't score. Every other drive was either a touchdown or a field goal. I think one was a field goal and the rest of them were touchdowns. So the offense really just got going, and I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that they just started giving Kaden Durham the ball and let him consistently churn out yards as a runner. And when you have a running back who can churn out 5-10 yards a clip to go along with a passing attack that is as dangerous as maybe any in the SEC, it's going to be hard to stop that. And especially when you're wearing down a defense that was like a house on fire to start the game. But it's that running game I thought was just absolutely massive. And the fact that they were able to find their running back in Kaden Durham, something that they haven't found through the first 2 weeks, was absolutely huge in this game. And I have a lot of respect for South Carolina's defense. I think they have a lot of great athletes on that defense, but LSU's receivers, they've been able to get open against whoever through the first 3 weeks.
They're good, man.
They're really good.
Yeah.
It's the strength of the team. Nussmeier to the receivers, it's the strength of the team. They got a lot of guys who can get open and make plays. And you just need to have some sort of rushing attack in order to enable those guys to get into the best situations as possible, and not lean on that passing attack too much, right? And because of that's why they've been able to find themselves. That's why they were really able to get the offense going. I think it was because of the run game, which that kind of sounds silly, but I really think that just enabled them to keep South Carolina's defense on its toes, tamper down South Carolina's pass rush, get itself into better down and distance situations, and get into just better looks, better defensive looks from South Carolina's back end. So, it just freed up everything else, that running game. It just created that diversity that they really needed on offense.
And a big part of LSU's, offensive success, I feel like, goes back to up front with the, what were they, like the Joe Moore finalists or something, the offensive line last year?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's a damn good group. And look, South Carolina, I think really, you can comment on this, but I mean, I think South Carolina really provided the best test for that offensive line thus far. I mean, they brought pressure early. They made life really tough on Nussmeier early in that game. I feel like as it wore on, you saw them missing tackles and stuff defensively. But, I mean, going back to LSU, I mean, one of the big storylines in this game was those offensive tackles with Jones and Campbell going up against Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard. I mean, I think Kennard held his own for the most part, but, I mean, Dylan Stewart, he really didn't do much in this game. What do you kind of think about that battle between Campbell and Dylan Stewart?
Yeah, I think the takeaway for a lot of LSU fans or even LSU people is that LSU's offensive line has not lived up to the hype, and that and a lot of people are going to say, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to say it for sure, but that they didn't live up to the hype in this game either. Like, they should have been even better, because again, like the expectations for this offensive line heading into the season were sky high, and and I thought Nuss got pressured quite a bit in this game. And and Stewart was quiet. I'll definitely give you that. But Kennard was all over the place for the entire game.
Crazy.
And and the fact that, and it seemed like either Jones or Campbell or whoever, they were definitely there. At times there seemed to be missed assignments. At least that's what they showed on the game broadcast. At times, one or both those guys got beat. It wasn't a perfect performance from them. I think they survived. They did well enough to win this game, and then they did better as the game went along. But especially to start, it was a rocky start for them for sure. So I'd give their performance like a B-, C+, honestly, in terms of the offensive line in general. I thought the run blocking was again like pretty okay, good enough once you get the right running back in there. And Kaden Durham, again, he gets an A+. And just to give you guys some perspective on Durham, like Durham was a guy who, I mean, I didn't even know if he'd get that many carries in this game, that if he'd get that many carries all season, given the amount of carries he got in this game. And the reason why he got this opportunity was because John Emery tore his ACL after week 1. And they've been really trying to find somebody to break some tackles and to get some consistent gains on the ground. They finally found that. It seems like they finally found that guy in Durham. I think between Caleb Jackson and Josh Williams, two guys who I think every LSU fan expected to be their top 2 backs this season. Those 2 guys averaged I think less than 3 yards a carry in this game, and Durham averaged 8.9. And I don't think it was because the blocking got way better for Kaden Durham. I think Durham just played great, and he did what you bring in a high 4-star guy to do. And the kid's just a freshman and really wasn't much in the picture throughout the preseason, and in week 1 and in week 1 especially, because there wasn't a ton of opportunity for him as the number 4 running back on this team. He played a little bit more in week 2, didn't have a great game in that game either. So this performance really kind of came out of nowhere. And I think a lot of LSU fans are very thankful for what Kaden Durham did in this game for them.
Now, I just want to hear your truthful take on this.
Okay.
Did you see any sort of holding calls or anything that was missed on the offensive line for LSU? Because looking back, I'm looking on Twitter and stuff, and I see a lot of people saying like this comment right here, there's holding all game by LSU. I think specifically on Jones, apparently there was a ton of missed holding calls. I saw some photos or whatever that show that he did. I mean, did you see anything that maybe stood out? Or
it's hard. I haven't gone back and watched the game again, so I can't really give you a good answer on that, if I'm being honest. But in the college game in general, I feel like there's just a ton of holds and they just never call them.
Yeah.
That's for both sides. And I think there were enough penalties in this game. I don't think this game was determined by the penalties at all, for either side. Even if you say that, it was an illegal block for the LSU punt and there was no offensive pass interference call, if those 2 get reversed, you probably get roughly the same result of the game. So it's going to be, I think this game, what mattered more to me was the injury to Sellers, because it just transformed South Carolina's offense into something that was untenable.
It changed everything with that. And it's not like Sellers is some world-class passer, not yet at least. I don't know if he's not throwing for 300 yards, right? He went 9 of 16, 113 yards. He did have the interception, which I understand the play call on that because it's 3rd and 11. You're at I think the LSU 30. Take a shot to the end. But I think the blocking just also wasn't great on that play. But overall, man, I think there was such a difference in the play calling because it's they're running the ball. Rocket Sanders is picking up big carries. But what's interesting to me, I think it was maybe in when was that fumble on the snap that Nussmeier didn't get? Was that the 3rd quarter? I'm trying to think.
I forgot which quarter. It was definitely second half, though.
Yeah, let me take a look. But point is, I think right after that, South Carolina was in prime territory, had a chance to score. And here we go. It was in the 4th quarter, and Robbie Ashford, rush middle, 1-yard loss. Robbie Ashford, rush left, 1-yard gain. Robbie Ashford, passing complete deep to right to Nick Harbor. on that type of thing, I mean, you're at the LSU 25-yard line. That's the one time I'll say, why on earth are you not feeding the ball to Rocket Sanders there? I felt like that was a huge break in the game because it ended up in a Herrera field goal. But it's like you get the big turnover you need all game long, and it's like you only get a field goal out of it, and you didn't even use your best player.
Yeah. I again, like LSU did not tackle very well in this game, and Sanders was a guy that they had trouble taking down for sure. So I can definitely see that perspective.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, let's dive a little more into LSU here. What did you make of them in a game like this? I mean, tough road environment going into Columbia. Obviously, game day was in town. I feel like all the eyes of college football just happened to be on this game. I mean, what did you make of the way the Tigers handled it and came out of here with a victory?
Well, I mean, you have to give them at least some credit for the perseverance they showed in this game. It was night and day from the perseverance they showed against the Trojans. But at the same time, given the amount of mistakes that they made consistently in this game, the two turnovers, the turnovers on downs inside the 1 yard line, the lack of tackling on defense, the two giant runs that they gave up in this game, especially the second one was especially egregious because you knew they were just going to run the ball for the entire second half. And all that considered, and you still barely win by 3 in a game that you really controlled in the second half because of an injury that was gifted to you. I mean, you expect a better performance from a team that wants to make the college football playoff, for a team that heading into the year we thought was probably going to be like a 9 or 10 win team again. They have a couple weeks before their next big matchup, which is against Ole Miss at home. Like, that's going to be the game where that's going to kind of be the come to Jesus game for this team. Like, how good are they really? Because next week's UCLA is not a good football team. If you haven't noticed, they lost to Indiana at home 42-14 last night, which is rough. And then they play South Alabama the next week. So those games should be wins. And then they have a bye. So that's their remaining schedule before they play Ole Miss. And that Ole Miss game, which is a primetime game in Tiger Stadium, like that will be
the game.
That is the game. Yeah, that is the game. That's the same week as Ohio State, Oregon. That's the same week as Oklahoma, Texas. The same week as Penn State and USC. So it's just a massive week in college football, and LSU is going to be right smack in the middle of it. So that's the game that where we're really going to see this team's colors. And they still have a lot to improve on. Even if, I mean, again, the running game was very positive. The fact that the offense really got going against this very dangerous defense in the second half was very positive. Really, for the last 2.5 quarters, I'd say, like halfway through the second, when South Carolina took the 17-0 lead. From that point on, LSU was the better team. At least when LSU had the ball, they were just fantastic. They were just really good offensively. I mean, even though there were the turnovers, they just consistently were able to move the ball and get almost whatever they wanted against a really good defense. But defensively, they still have some things to clean up, and they have a shaky secondary that you saw got exposed a couple times in this game. Their defensive line is right now a bit of a mishmash, especially when it comes to stopping the run because of the Jacoby Guillory injury. This team is nowhere near where it probably wants to be, and it made a lot of mistakes that you can't make in a big time game like this. But they have the talent, and especially on offense, to be a good team this year. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, second half, man, just something. I mean, you're kind of right, man. I mean, look, South Carolina had that 17-0 lead, and it's like, okay, like everything's going well for them, man. Like they were playing great in all three phases: offense, defense. You get the block on special teams. I don't know why, for whatever reason, just things didn't click after that. But like you said, I mean, LSU was really playing solid after that, and I feel like Nussmeier really stepped up and made some great throws. Obviously, his receivers are really solid, but I mean, some of the plays he also made. I mean, the throw to his tight end was. Mason Taylor, I don't know why South Carolina wasn't covering. I think it was the go-ahead score there in the fourth quarter. But I mean, what do you make of Nussmeier and his ability to really play well, even after the fact of Carolina bringing pressure and trying to get to him?
The interception was a tough mistake. He definitely thought I think it was the line. He definitely thought the edge rusher was going to rush there, but he dropped into coverage and he just didn't see him. That was the interception. But besides that, I mean, given the amount of pressure that he was under for the entire game, and then given the fact that they didn't have much of a running game for about half of this game, I thought he did really well. And there were a couple throws that he made that were very impressive. There was one throw over the middle to Aaron Anderson where he's getting hit where Nussmeier's getting hit underneath, and he has to layer a ball over a linebacker 20 yards downfield to little Aaron Anderson over the middle of the field. And it was a Sunday throw, and it was a fantastic play. And it was the sort of throw that Jaden wouldn't even made last year, because Jaden really didn't attack the middle of the field too much. So it was, I thought, like, there are times where he makes throws. He can make plays and throw balls into windows that are Sunday throws that really get a good NFL quarterbacks make. He's not. And the thing that I think there was the worry heading into the season, that he was going to make a ton of mistakes, throw a ton of interceptions. Maybe not a ton, but like, he was mistake prone because he was a guy who liked to take risks and was a gunslinger, so quote unquote. And we haven't really seen that tendency as much this season. I mean, he's been a lot more content and drop with just, layering the ball underneath and throwing it to his check down. And he's just been he's done a really good job of reading defenses and being on time with his throws and just being very accurate in certain situations. Shielding his receivers on certain plays and throwing the ball only where they can grab it and stuff like that, where that, like, when you have very talented receivers and you have a quarterback who can make those nuanced plays, it certainly can help out an offense, and I've definitely helped them out. Really, the only thing for LSU's offense that they've needed to clean up, again, is the running game in order to enable Nussmeier, in order to make Nussmeier's life easier and put them in better situations and better coverages in order for him to make more of those throws. And you finally saw that in this game with Kaden Durham. So we talked about him a ton already. So, I think with Nuss, again, he's not the problem right now. He is far from the problem with this LSU game for
sure. What is the problem in your opinion with LSU? I mean, what would you, ideally they play UCLA next week, you said, right? Yeah. And by the way, Indiana beat UCLA 42-13. That is
42-13. I'm sorry, I got
to. I was like, I saw Indiana was winning. I'm like, that's an egregious loss, man. That's what has happened to UCLA. What's happened to USC? I'll give them credit; they're pretty good this year. Southern Cal, but man, UCLA, they are just. It's not looking good.
It's a total rebuild project that they're going on over there. It's probably going to take a couple years before we can really dissect is it systemic, or did they hire the wrong coach, or maybe it's actually working. You never know. So it's gonna they're in rebuilding mode for sure. But anyway, in terms of like the problems with LSU, I still, let's still see what Kaden Durham does over the next couple weeks before we mint him as the next Leonard Fournette. Because, and again, like, I think regardless, you're going to need better performances out of Josh Williams and Caleb Jackson too. I mean, Caleb Jackson, given some of the highlight reel plays he made last year and the explosiveness that he has, you'd expect better results from him so far. And also, I mean, the run blocking can improve for LSU's offensive line for sure as well. They don't give up a lot of negative plays on the ground, but it was a lot of like 1 yard gain, no yard gains in the running game, and not a lot of 4 and 5 yard gains. And you finally saw that this week, but with Durham. But anyway, I think most of the issues probably right now are defensively, I'd say. This team has not tackled very well, really, through the first 3 weeks of the season. And this has kind of been a constant issue getting back to last season as well. So this is something that you're going to need to see cleaned up. And I think in the secondary, I think they've made some strides there, just in terms of the coverage that they're playing. Schematically, they're being a little bit more aggressive with opposing receivers. That's a very good. I like that comment because it's very. I would agree.
He was tough to bring down.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a lot like those water bugs, that just kind of go
Yeah.
those quick little water bugs that zip around the pond. uh, but and a lot of it's defensively. It's the tackling. It's what are you going to do with your second defensive tackle spot next to Gio Paez with Jacoby and Guillory, who was their best defensive tackle towards Achilles in week 2. So that kind of created a bit of a vacuum at that defensive tackle spot. I mentioned the secondary. I think schematically they've gotten better there. They've gotten a little more aggressive there. I think Ashton Stamps has definitely improved at the spot, but they're just not as talented as they've been in the past in the secondary, especially at corner. And their safety position is a position where they've been trying to find more production at that spot in general. And, and it just, trying to find Harold and the $1 million question as always is like trying to get Harold Perkins in a spot where he can create damage. And you saw that once or twice in this game. There was the fumble.
Yeah, the one
that they had. Yeah, the fumble recovery that they had. He was involved in that play. He did create some havoc in the backfield a little bit in this game, along with Braden Swinson. But it's still not quite to the level that I think LSU fans want to see it at. So I think there's still a lot of questions for this defense, even if I think some of the blitzes they brought in this game were really, really well designed, really well done. And it confused Robbie Ashford and Lenora Sellers. And they just did I think Baker's ability to create when LSU puts opposing defenses in the third and longs, I feel a lot better about their defense because of just the creativity that they can show on these blitzes and the way they can confuse quarterbacks. That's the strength of this defense when they blitz and get those athletes after the quarterback. But when they have to sit back in coverage, that's not a strength. Defending the run has been very up and down. Putting Harold Perkins into the best spot possible has been very up and down. They still don't have the athletes that you want to have at corner and at safety right now. So, again, there's a lot of issues with this defense still, even if it's probably better than it was last season. But again, that's a very low bar.
Yeah. And look, Blake Baker, I think what we saw, I was impressed with the blitzes he was bringing yesterday. I mean, I think LSU, for what it's worth, I know defense hasn't really been great this year. I think they did a really solid job of, like you said, swarming to Sellers and Ashford and kind of confusing them. And look, some of the plays they brought, like the one with Harold Perkins getting in on that play, that was a greatly designed play, and that's how you do it. But on the flip side, man, kind of shifting the focus back to Carolina, what did you make of them? I don't know how much you really knew about them coming into this game. Obviously, research leading up to the game, but seeing them live in action, what did you make of this team, and what positives can you take away for the people listening?
I'm an AP poll voter this year, so I've tried to keep an eye on as many teams as humanly possible over these first 3 or 4 weeks, and I watched the Old Dominion game. I watched a good chunk of that, and I thought the offense looked totally dysfunctional, and I thought, defensively they have a lot of athletes there, but it's not going to matter because they can't move the ball. But I thought I saw a much improved team this week. I think they were probably closer to making my top 25 than most people would think, even though they lost this game, because I thought they got some bad breaks and could have easily won this game. And I don't know. I'm just impressed with the athletes they have defensively, especially. And when you got a guy like Kennard and a guy like Stewart on the edges, especially, and Debo Williams is a good linebacker, and they've got a pretty talented defense that's going to stop a lot of offenses this season and going to give a lot of good offenses some trouble. On the flip side, they need Sellers to be healthy because when Ashford's in the game, they just can't really throw the ball. But if Sellers is in there, at least you have an excellent athlete who is still trying to grow as a passer. He still needs to hit his layups more often and more efficiently. Sometimes he throws the ball too hard underneath and it just sort of deflects out the guy's hands, or he's just inaccurate, and he needs to clean that stuff up, because that's the sort of stuff that those are just the gimmies that you need to have, or else defenses are just going to force you to do that over and over and over again. And you're going to be a lot easier to defend. And, I'd like to see them be a little bit more efficient in the running game, but it's going to be hard to do that if they can't consistently throw the ball and make those short to medium passes, let alone the long stuff. I think the quarterback position and just getting more consistency from the passing game is like kind of the key to their season. Like if Garrett Nussmeier was on South Carolina, like they could win 9 or 10 games.
Oh yeah, and that's not to say Sellers isn't a bad quarterback. Sellers is what works for that offense because he's dynamic as a runner and passer. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't really remember Garrett Nussmeier ever really taking off for 75-yard touchdowns or anything.
No.
But the point
is he dynamic as a passer though?
Oh, Sellers,
that's my problem. Like, I don't think I just think you're going to force him to throw the ball. And if he makes a good play, he makes a good play. But like, there's no consistency to it. That's the problem.
Yeah, and that's the thing that they kind of need to figure out offensively is this passing game because week 1, man, against Old Dominion, it was. I'll tell you, for someone that didn't watch, it was rough. Like watching that game was. Man, they cannot throw the ball and. Against Kentucky, they won 31-6 for a reason, and obviously defensively was the main reason why. But it's like they're throwing the ball a little better, but the run game is their bread and butter, and they are going to have to work on throwing it better. But Nussmeier in this offense would be dangerous. It would be put him on South Carolina, dude. It'd be crazy. But now, just wanted before I get you out of here, why don't you go ahead and just share, where the people can find your work. I know you cover LSU, but you do a great job over there. So, where can they find your stuff?
Yeah. On Twitter, I'm at Koki Riley, same spelling, no spaces. And then you can catch my stuff on the Advocate and NOLA.com. That's pretty much where you can find me. I cover LSU football and baseball. So.
Yeah, and you do a great job covering LSU baseball. Also, speaking of baseball, what can you tell the people about Paul Mainieri? I know you got to interview him right before he came to Carolina, right? So, what's your overall impression of the guy?
Yeah, I've gotten to talk with him a couple times now, and I think he's extremely excited to be a head coach again. He's a guy who never, even before he said it, never really seemed like a guy who was satisfied with being retired. And now that he's much healthier physically, I think he's just absolutely jazzed to have this job. I haven't tracked South Carolina's offseason as closely as you have, South Carolina baseball's offseason as closely as you have, but I do think that matchup at the very end of the regular season in South Carolina is going to be really interesting.
That's going to be crazy.
Jay Johnson against Paul Mainieri in Columbia. So I'm at least right now. I'll be there for that. So that'll be a pretty fun weekend for sure.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and you have a place to come stay if you need to come to Columbia. But man, that's going to be a. When I saw the schedule released, I'm like, of course, that's the final series of the regular series.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! But Koki, appreciate it, man. It's always good catching up with you, and hope to have you back on here again soon once baseball gets going.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
All right, appreciate it, man. And that was good friend Koki Riley from The Advocate. Thank you so much to him for joining me. And again, he does a great job covering LSU football and especially baseball. That is definitely his bread and butter. So yeah, definitely appreciate him hopping on. If you guys want to go ahead and drop him a follow, I know he covers LSU, but again, he does a great job in general. If you like reading good work, he does a fantastic job. So I'll plug his Twitter account in here if you want to follow him. But yeah, so I'm gonna start answering some questions here in just a second. But yeah, so anyway, let's get into some of the questions that we got here. William Jones says, Jack, have you heard anything about recruiting? So from what I understand, again, I'll be honest, recruiting is more of Wes Mitchell and Chris Clark's expertise. That is part of their job title, recruiting. I covered more than just the day-to-day team and stuff. But I will say from what I have seen on Twitter and just hearing in general, it sounds like it's been absolutely fantastic for Carolina. Just a lot of positive reviews. And again, that atmosphere yesterday was electric. You had just packed out place. I mean, College Game Day was in town, as if that didn't bring enough attention. Just so many people. I mean, Shane Beamer talked about it. I mean, so many recruits wanted to come to this game and see South Carolina in action, and it was really, I think, a good showing for this program. I mean, take out the loss aside from this game, Carolina really did a good job of just packing the place out and showing what an atmosphere at Williams-Brice Stadium is like, because again, it is awesome. I mean, I came into yesterday thinking like, okay, this has the potential to be one of the loudest crowds I've ever witnessed at a live sporting event. It definitely lived up to it. Like, no fans were leaving. It was, I mean, it was a nice day out, honestly. I mean, the weather at first was a little gloom and doom, but honestly, as the game went on, it was wonderful outside and just an overall great time. But I mean, yeah, I mean, you had Auburn edge commit Jared Smith at the game yesterday. If you want to go on to GamecockCentral.com to read a little bit more about what was said and stuff, Smith was saying it was good being back on campus and good being at South Carolina. And here's the best quote, I think, from it. Obviously he's committed to Auburn right now, and that's where his focus is. But he did say the atmosphere was crazy. Just me getting out of the car was crazy. So that is awesome to hear. And that's just one example. I mean, there's so many different. I mean, go on Twitter. I mean, there's so many different, commits and stuff and recruits that just spoke very highly of South Carolina. So I think from that aspect, it was definitely a successful day for the Gamecocks. And next question, I've got starred here. It comes from Big Red. Is our rushing game getting better, or are the defenses we've been playing or we played been really off? I think Carolina's rushing game is getting better. I think you saw in the first game of the year, they ran the ball, I think, like 56 times for, like 175 yards. I mean, it was a tough 175 yards. It wasn't like they were getting it in Rocket Sanders and Lenore Sellers 75 and 66-yard gains. I mean, it was a lot of 20, 15, 10-yard gains and a lot of small yardage plays. But yesterday, I think, was a very good showing for this rushing attack. And, I mean, look, you don't rush for 243 yards on 41 carries by accident. I mean, you also averaged 5.9 yards per carry. I know that's going to get inflated by the huge gains by Sellers and Sanders, but overall, man, I think they ran the ball very effectively yesterday, and it is going to be the identity of this offense, I think. I think the passing game is continuing to get better for Carolina, but I think from a run game standpoint, it's always going to be their strength. I mean, with a guy like Rocket Sanders, you have to feed him the ball, and he is really performing well right now. And I said it multiple times leading up to this game. I expected it to be the breakout game for him. I mean, I think Prize Picks, one of our main sponsors, had Sanders' more than or less than rushing yards at like 68.5, I think. Just going off the top of my head, and he cleared that by a large margin. So he had a great game yesterday. And Big Red asks a follow-up question. Did we have more rushing yards yesterday than we have had per game all last season? Totally. I mean, look, last year's rushing game, I don't even have to look up the stat just to tell you. The rushing game last year was just not there at all. I mean, you really didn't have – I mean, you had Mario Anderson. No disrespect to him. He was fine. But, I mean, Rocket Sanders is a huge, huge improvement at running back. And at some point, Shane Beamer did say during the teleconference tonight, he would like to see the other running backs get a little bit more involved. But it's tough right now. I mean, look, Rocket Sanders is doing his thing, but Oscar Attaway only having one carry for 1 yard yesterday, that's not going to cut it. And honestly, I mean, Juju McDowell didn't do anything in the run game yesterday. And, I mean, look, it's just you want to get more running backs involved, but it's not as easy as it may seem. So, and another big question we got here from RCS says, why does our O-line continuously get called for being downfield? I don't know how many times it takes to learn from that mistake. Yeah, it's something that, look, they call a lot of RPOs, and Shane was asked about tonight, didn't really give a great answer, quite honestly. But they call a lot of RPOs, and he kind of counteracted that and said they don't, but I'm under the belief they do. And sometimes you're going to get guys going downfield, and we saw a lot of that in this game, and I think that's just the territory that kind of comes with it. At least that's what I gathered from what the players had to say. But we're going to have to see. I'm going to read a little more of these questions here. I got Big Red asks another one. Did the weather have anything to do with our play late in the game. What? The weather. The weather was fine. What? I mean, coming into the week, the weather was supposed to be, raining and stuff, but like I think the weather, I mean, unless I'm missing something. I mean, I was at that game. It was sunny out majority of the day. I mean, I could be wrong, but like I'm pretty sure the weather was fine. I mean, look, I'll say it again, like I did speaking with our guest Koki Riley early at the beginning of the show. You had a 17-0 lead. You literally had everything good that needed to go good for you going. I mean, your offense was clicking. You had your best drive of the season on the first possession. Your defense was swarming Nussmeier and playing really well. And you got a Beamer ball punt. Maurice Brown with the blocked punt that led to Rocket Sanders scoring a 10-yard touchdown on the next play early in that game. And I don't know what happened after that. LSU just started playing better, I think. But I also think the defense kind of got worn down a little bit. And, it happens. But again, this is a game that I know a lot of people are going to blame this game on the officiating and stuff. But South Carolina they missed tackles. I think on third down was kind of an issue. I'm going to look up the numbers here, but trying to find it right here. On third down, they went 3 of 12. I mean, that's not going to win you a football game. And look, a lot of these penalties South Carolina had were also just very on them. Like, okay, some of them obviously are left up to chance and stuff, like some of the pass interference calls and guys being downfield and stuff. Like you can't have that. And I think more times than not, officials are going to call that. But I mean, I'll say it again. And I know some people will disagree. The call on Kennard with both of them, actually, the horse collar, to me, it impacted the play. Like you tugged him down, and I know people are going to say like, it's not a horse collar, but it looked like one to me. And then the hit that, roughing or I guess unnecessary roughness it was called on, on Kennard for hitting Nussmeier. Again, Nussmeier had no impact he had no chance of catching Nicky Minwari on the interception that was returned for a touchdown. So it felt like just a weird play to me. And I don't know, just something was strange about that. But, defensively, they definitely got worn down. And Jada just puts it bluntly. I totally agree. 6 total plays in the third quarter was horrible. The defense was gassed after that. Absolutely. I mean, guys after the game were coming in talking to us. I mean, Nicky Minwari is a great example because he was one of the 2 guys. We spoke to him and Debo Williams after the game. I mean, Nick was just saying that they were tired. I mean, he kept getting, I guess he was cramped up or whatever late in that game there. I mean, he was down on the field and had to be helped off twice. I mean, he was gassed, and a lot of those guys were. And Chuck brings up a great point too. Third quarter wore us down. 25 plays for LSU, 6 for us. Defense got worn down, led to missed tackles, a lot of them. Yeah. And that's no excuse for the missed tackles, but it does have some sort of impact. And it's just the missed tackles just kept adding up. And I think I was talking with Mike Yuva earlier, and we spoke earlier on the phone this morning, and he was telling me that Carolina had, this is a great stat, by the way, and not great in the sense of like it's good for South Carolina. It's just a noteworthy stat to look at when you think about this big picture. So 19 missed tackles in the first 2 games, 17 total yesterday. Tired or not, that is not good. Like, I don't care how you draw it up. I think South Carolina played a lot better in these first 2 games, obviously. I know they were the better team that should have won yesterday for multiple reasons, but I mean, there were less penalties in the first 2 games. Your defense was playing super solid in those 2 games. And granted, I know it's not the same type of opponent as LSU in terms of quality, but there were so many things South Carolina did right in those first 2 games that I felt like it just didn't carry over as much into this game. Like I felt like you were a lot more undisciplined in this game. You made a lot of self-inflicted mistakes that normally I thought you didn't make in the first 2 games. Like it was just a noticeable difference yesterday, and it's something you got to clean up. And it's not going to be as simple as snapping your fingers and it's like, hey, South Carolina has 0 penalties next week, and they're going to be playing very clean football. But if you're making that many mistakes, I mean, it reflects in the score. Bad calls are good calls by the officiating. again, I think there was a great quote from Shane in the teleconference earlier tonight. I'll go ahead and read it out just so I have everything in order. Here's the quote. Quote, the thing I've talked to about with the players is that a lot of the things where we've got to be better. The officials did not cause us to jump off sides twice. The officials did not cause us to lose leverage on a zero blitz and give up a completion. The officials did not cause us to miss some tackles. The officials didn't cause us offensively to have a false start for not being set before the snap. And the officials didn't cause us to fumble wherever it was. I think it was 4 times yesterday. So we need to look at ourselves. We're not going to seek comfort by looking at the officials. So that's how we've handled it as well. I've got to coach better. I've got to continue to put these guys in a position to make plays. There's no doubt about it. Again, totally right. For Beamer blaming and not even blaming, just making an excuse out of a penalty or taunting not being called after the Herrera missed field goal, which was ridiculous in my opinion. Him saying the fact that the officials were not the main reason South Carolina lost this game. Like, again, he brings up all the good points. A lot of what South Carolina did wrong in this game just came down to the fact that you made errors that you're normally not accustomed to making because you played very well in the first 2 games of the year, despite playing close against Old Dominion. So, look, I agree with Beamer on that. Fundamentally speaking, you got to be able to tackle better, like Jay Diz says, and it's got to improve because I mean, look, you get Akron this week, and then you get you're back. You get the bye week, and then you begin the gauntlet of a month in October, which I mean, very well could be 0-3. But from my perspective, I think South Carolina has a decent chance to go 1-2. Because you get the home game with Ole Miss, and then you have the critical 2-game road trip at Alabama and then at Oklahoma. And if you read my predictions at the beginning of the year, you'd know that I picked South Carolina to go 1-2 in those games, but I do have them beating Oklahoma, which right after the Red River rivalry game, I think is a very decent possibility. But that's just my opinion on it, and we're going to have to see. And Chuck says, amen, and amen, Coach Beamer. Totally agree. Look, like I said, the officials are not the end-all, be-all. You shouldn't have to bank on you shouldn't have to come up with the fact that the officials, for as bad as it was, that being the reason why South Carolina lost. There's so many other reasons why South Carolina lost this game. And look, the officiating, I have said it wasn't good. But South Carolina beat itself with some of the mistakes that if you don't make them, it's like, hey, you probably win this football game. And Big Red asks a great question. Was that coach speak, or do you think he really thinks that was the case? I do think from what I gathered in his teleconference, he did say there were a lot of plays that he is going to he's already spoken to the SEC League office and said that he didn't have to send in any plays for further review or clarification over the last 2 weeks. But this week, he sent in, quote, quite a few plays to the league office and to the head official. And he seemed critical of a few things when it came to the officiating. The only one he really brought up specifically was not calling taunting or anything on the missed field goal at the end of the game. But other than that, he didn't really get into any specifics. But more so to kind of answer your question, Big Red, just in general with him talking about what I said before with the officials not being the reason why South Carolina had false starts, offsides, missed tackles, this and that. I do think he believes it because, look, again, you're not – even with all the penalties, if you maybe make a tackle on 3rd and 11 or you're not offsides or whatever the case may be, you're offsides on 4th and 3 when you shouldn't have been. Maybe you win this game. Like, that's the big thing, is that you're doing things that you didn't do in the first 2 games. And it's not regression, I think. It's more so just like, when you're in a 4-quarter dogfight. LSU didn't start this game out great by any means. South Carolina played very well to start this game and nearly had LSU on the ropes. But the Tigers, despite all the issues they had at the beginning of this game, they found a way to play better as the game went on. And you see it in the 4th quarter when they're they're able to not only take the lead once, but when South Carolina went down and scored again, they retook the lead in the final 2 minutes. And again, that's going to be that's a tough team right there. I mean, look, South Carolina, I think, played better in this game, but LSU, let's give them a little bit of credit here. I think they did a good job to make enough plays in the end with Nussmeier, that receiving corps, and they ran the ball very well for the most part. So Big Red asks another question. Does Brian Kelly making a big deal out about the block or the punt block mean that he knows something was off? I don't know, to be honest. I'm kind of confused on the fact of I haven't heard exactly what BK had to say about it. All I know is he was putting it in for a review with the league office. I don't know what he's seeing on that. And Koki Riley, who was on me earlier from the LSU beat, doesn't really know what the deal with what that was either. Just because, I mean, we watched the play and it's like, what was the issue with it? Maurice Brown made a heck of a play. I mean, he had a clear lane to just bull rush into the LSU barricade, and then he jumps over the top and just dives and puts his body on the line. I mean, I was listening to the broadcast today for the first time. Kirk Herbstreit, one of the color commentators for ABC, he literally, I think, said like he had never seen anything like that with the effort Mo Brown put in on that play, and that's a guy that has earned his scholarship right there. I mean, that's a great story right there. And hopefully we'll get to talk to him on Tuesday. I requested to speak to him for player availability, but we'll see what happens. I mean, that's a great play, man. That's a great story that you literally were put on scholarship not even a week ago. And a few days later, you make one of the huge plays in the game. I mean, look, I know South Carolina lost, but I mean, that's a massive play. And you got to give credit to him because that's a beamer ball textbook type play. And Big Red says maybe he thinks that that is launching. I don't know, man. I'm sorry I can't give a better answer on it, but like I'm still confused. I think as many of you guys are with what he's seeing. I mean, there's probably something, but I can't put my finger on it. Watching, I'm like, it was a great play, and give credit to Mo Brown. That's really all you can say about it. And William Jones says, were the officials wearing goggles? I don't remember seeing the officials wearing any goggles or anything, but if they were, I'm sure they, I don't know. I mean, look, the officiating, say what you will. I do think sometimes the game really did get slowed down, and just because it was like flag after flag after flag. But again, like I said before, I mean, some of the flags that were thrown were just clear and obvious. I mean, it's tough. I get it. Like, obviously, for South Carolina, so sorry, getting a call from somebody. Apologies about that. But if you guys heard that, I don't know. But anyway, officiating. Look, sometimes just it wasn't great. Look, a lot of people are upset about it, but again, it's like South Carolina made a lot of mistakes in this game, and you make less of them, you win this game. It's easy as that. And I think that is the main thing that I could take away from this. But I think overall, we're going to see what happens this weekend against Akron. Big game coming up. I know obviously it's more likely than not going to be a win for Carolina. I think they're favored by like 4 touchdowns or something. I think South Carolina has a lot to learn about themselves in a game like this. And, Big Red brings up a good point. I do feel bad for Akron. They may need a Prius after the game. Our guys are going to play with great mouths. I think the thing with South Carolina is this is your definition of a tune-up game right here. Like, if Carolina can just come out here and play their brand of football, they're going to smoke Akron. And I think you're going to see a much more disciplined team, a team that doesn't make the same type of mistakes twice. I mean, that's the thing that we're going to learn about this football team this weekend is if they're continuing to make the same mistakes over and over again. I mean, have you really improved at all? I know illegal man downfield seems to be a repetitive issue they have had, and as well as not having great ball security. But this is a weekend where it's like, okay, you don't need to have the same mistakes you did as last week, and you're not playing the same quality opponent. But you can go out here and hopefully you get a lot of backups in. You can learn a lot about those guys in that way, but you can also learn like, hey, like, how much have we actually improved since last week? And they're going into a bye after this. So they're going to have, essentially, I know they're not looking ahead to Ole Miss right now, but you're going to have 2 weeks to get ready for Ole Miss. And at the same time, you have a lot of improvements to make before that Ole Miss game. And if you want to have a chance at winning that game, your defense needs to be able to play well for 4 quarters. You can't be getting worn down and tired. Like, I think the conditioning has probably been fine, but it's just like, again, the point that was brought up earlier, the offense did not do much to help South Carolina in that third quarter running 6 plays in total and only gaining 1 yard of offense. I mean, that's inexcusable. And LSU was on the field majority of the time. So for the defense and for South Carolina in general, you have a lot to figure out. But I think this week against Akron is going to be a really good way to test where they're at. And Big Red says, is Akron all around better than Old Dominion? Well, look, Old Dominion, I'm pretty sure Old Dominion is 0-3 to start the season. I'm just going to take a look real quick. But they're 0-3 to start the season. They lost to Carolina, lost to ECU last week, and they lost to Virginia Tech by 20. So by no means is their schedule been easy at all. But for Akron, historically speaking, I know they have not been good. They actually played, fun fact, if you did not know, Akron played Carolina back in, I want to say 2018, I think. So I think Carolina had a week 3 matchup against Marshall scheduled for that series or that year. And I know some of the longtime fans in here that have known Carolina football forever now, way longer than I have, probably know more about why the Marshall game I think there was like a storm or something. But anyway, that Marshall game like early in the year in 2018 gets canceled, and you have to find a makeup game. And I think it was during SEC championship weekend. I would know since I was there at the Akron game. South Carolina played the Zips, and they won back in 2018. So they have played recently, of course, kind of just by sheer luck. But this time around, it's a scheduled game. And for Akron this year, I mean, to really tell you much about this team, I mean, they lost 52-6 to Ohio State. They lost 49-17 against Rutgers. And in their first home game yesterday, they beat Koki 31-20. Not the toothpaste, a actual football team. And so for South Carolina, they should have no issues winning this game. I mean, look, the spread and stuff, I don't really care about that too much because it has no impact on the game itself outside of having a fun time watching football, I guess, in that way. But anyway, it's like the spread. I mean, if South Carolina doesn't cover, I think that should kind of tell you a lot about like where things are at. Like if South Carolina's not winning this game by a large margin, is basically what I'm trying to get at. If South Carolina isn't winning by 20 plus points or whatever, I think that's kind of an issue. Like if Akron's hanging around in like the third, fourth quarter, that's an issue. But I think Old Dominion, to kind of answer the question, is much tougher opponent than what Akron's going to be, historically speaking, and just from what we're seeing so far this year. Tough schedule for Old Dominion. But hey, that's a good point. They are making a good bit of money. I know Carolina paid up a good bit for Old Dominion to come to town. They played a heck of a game that day. So, I totally agree. To kind of end things on this before we wrap up, I hope we're not looking ahead to Ole Miss. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Big Red. You should not be looking ahead to anyone. I don't care who the opponent is. I mean, you could be playing like a FCS bunch or whatever the case might be. I mean, this is a MAC team that we're talking about with Akron. They're gonna come in here hungry and ready to play, and they feel like they probably have nothing to lose. I mean, despite starting out the year 0-3, I mean, this is a game that obviously everyone is gonna probably pick South Carolina to win, as would I, and they're gonna see that and they're gonna use that as motivation to like, hey, we got nothing to lose. Let's go out here and play our best football, and maybe something good will happen. But I agree. Don't look ahead to Ole Miss. Don't do it because that's the worst thing you could do, and you never know. You could get upset. You could be like Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois in a game that everyone absolutely picked Notre Dame to win as a top 5 team in the country back then. But that is a prime example of why you don't look ahead. So that is going to do it for this week's episode of GC Live Sunday Reset with myself. I will be back on here next Sunday, probably back Sunday night, I'd say, depending on, probably Sunday night again. And we'll talk all things South Carolina Akron game. And hopefully we are talking about a Carolina victory. So be sure to stay locked into GamecockCentral.com for all coverage, live updates for press conferences this week. And we're going to have a lot of great stories coming out and a lot more to break down. And also, I will say, if you don't know, I am on 107.5 The Game every Monday and Thursday. And usually Mondays are Reaction Monday at 107.5. If you want to listen to more of what I have to say over there, I'm going to be on from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. tomorrow. And I'll be diving into all my thoughts just like I did tonight, but probably a little bit more so with Tyler Head over there on radio. So definitely check it out. And I appreciate all you guys tuning in. And thanks for thanks for the therapy session. I'm glad I can provide free therapy for anyone. And look, you guys, the fans out there, I know this was a really hard pill to swallow. And this is my last thought. Really tough pill to swallow with this game. But think about it this way. South Carolina's 2-1 right now. They have a really, really great chance to start out a year 3-1. I mean, when's the last time you could say that? Especially in the Shane Beamer era where his teams are notorious for getting off to slow starts. And granted, that's because of a tough schedule most of the time. But the point is, South Carolina normally starts out slow and finishes strong. Maybe this is the year where they start out strong, despite the loss to LSU, start out 3-1, and then they get rolling going into November. I mean, we'll see what happens, but we'll have to see what happens. So, again, appreciate you guys all tuning in, and I will go ahead and see you guys next Sunday, and I hope to see you then. Thanks so much for tuning in, and have a great rest of your night.